everybody, it's your man James, Mrs. Wonders Treasures, back again with some more video action for you. This is once again one of our jaunts into the world of comic book art. It's Artistry Appreciation, and for those of you new here who don't know what that is, Artistry Appreciation is where I take a piece of comic art from my own personal comic art collection that I own or have owned, and I show you why I think it's so cool, why I had to possess it, and why it's just a great thing. So, let's get on with the show. And before we do, I want to thank you all for joining me today. And say if you like what you see here, drop a like down there, help out the algorithms. Always appreciated by you guys. And then also, if you got any comments on the art, on anything I say, drop them down below. Always want to hear what the folks got to say. Your voice matters in this place. And then, of course, if you like what you see here, share out some links and get some more people in, because I always want to try to pump up those subscription numbers as much as I can. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do so yourself so you don't miss any of this content that I'm putting out around here. So with all that out of the way, let's get on into it. And today's Artist Appreciation is for artist Dan DeCarlo, which is a little bit something a little different from me. You guys probably going to see a little piece here that isn't the usual shtick you probably expect out of your boy, but it's just something that I felt I had to do, for the sake of being a serious comic art collector. So let's get right on into it, and we'll get me off the screen, and then we'll bring in the art as we share our screen. And here we are. It's the cover to Betty, number 12 from 1994. And we'll big that up for you guys so you can see a better shot of it here. This is Dan DeCarlo, inked by Allison Flood. Now, the thing about this is Archie comics really aren't my speed. Was never really a big Archie's fan. This is the kind of thing that's like, it's the sort of thing where people, if you're a fan, you're a fan. And if you're not, you're really not. But, for me, I got it because, like I said, as a serious comic art collector, I don't think you can call yourself one if you don't have at least one piece of Archie comic art in your collection. It's kind of like a standard. It's just Archie is so indelible to comics that you just have to have something. And so this is my piece here. And the classic Archie stuff, classic shtick, of humor and teenagers. Betty here making a sweater that they both can be in under. And gee, how could I have made a sweater like this? The little flirtatious type of humor that Archie is known for. That wholesomeness. It's we all know what she's getting at, but it's not too in your face about it. It's a lot of fun, and very cartoony style, which DeCarlo was known for. But here's the thing: is before DeCarlo went to work for Archie, he was much more salacious in his art, doing stuff for like Humorama and Sex to Sexty and things like that, and very much more risque style art. So it's kind of funny to see how a guy went from like that type of stuff, like almost stuff you would see in Playboy, and then here he is now as the guy working for Archie. And he was with Archie for a very long time. He came in like the mid 70s, and he remained working with the company until his passing in 2001. But his style is so indelible to Archie now that like a lot of artists who came up after him, Fernando Ruiz, Dan Parent, the Kennedy brothers, Jeff Schultz, they all kind of ape his style, because his style went from just his style to the Archie house style, and up until about what was it, like 2015 I think, or 2016, this was all you had, was this style of art. And then that's when they brought in the Riverdale type of stuff, and they started doing some new stuff with Archie, with other artists, stuff that isn't this classic style. But it's amazing to me how influential DeCarlo was, that not just for the 25 years he dominated at Archie was the style, but even for like over a decade after he was gone, it still dominated. And even today, if you go and buy the Archie Digest that you can find at your local supermarkets and stuff, and grocery stores, and on the newsstand, you'll still see artists drawing in a style very similar to Dan DeCarlo's here, with this, again, look, bold, thick lines. That's how you know they're going for a cartoony effect. Whenever you see the thick line, that's a cartoony effect. And just and he has lots of detail in here, in the hair, in the facial expressions, and it stymies me how a guy for like 4 decades dominated the Archie house style. Like his style became the style, and that is something you don't see very often with artists. Very few artists get that kind of an accreditation where they can like say that my style defined an entire genre. It defined an entire line of comics. Not many people can say that. And, DeCarlo was one of them. And, I always found it very fascinating that it happened that way. Because, like I said, coming from his more, risque roots, you wouldn't think a guy that would be very good in something as wholesome and, kind of almost childlike as Archie comics. And yet he was. And that's, just an amazing thing to me. Just one of those things that just, you never really understand why it happened that way. But sometimes, just the freak of nature, just things the way they work out. It's how it goes. But, I really love the simplicity in what he does here. He doesn't like to do a real wacky style on the sweater here, the double neck sweater. And just enough to make it so what it is, but it's not like he's like going crazy with the details. And again, his style is very simplistic when you get down to it. But as I've learned from watching artists myself, going to shows, seeing them draw sketches, someone I saw that, again, you say his art style is very simplistic was the great Tim Sale. And, I saw him one time drawing sketches for people after a show. And, you see his style and it looks so simplistic. It looks like it's just a few lines and then a couple heavy shadows and then, oh, there's your image. And it looks easy. But really, when I watch him, all the detail of knowing where to lay those shadows down, where to angle that line to get the maximum effect that he wanted, where to put in the detail and where to keep it out. That was all, a key in how he made it look so simplistic, even though it's not. That's the thing. It looks simple, but it really isn't. There's a lot of thought process that has to go into it. And I think DeCarlo style is also very much in that line. I mean, you look at this image and, you can see the corrections that were made, Archie's face, the hands, there were things that were probably done that said, you know what, we got to change that up a little bit. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's like, it's a simplistic style, but yet there's lots of little nuances that you got to really take into consideration when you're working in such a style like this, because you can really, really muff it up if you don't know exactly what it is you want to present and what it is that you're doing. You can easily make something that looks simplistic and make it look awful, or make it look overly rendered, overly, just too much detail that's like blocking out, the basics of what you're trying to get across. Like I said, there's a lot of thought that goes into a simplistic style. We all marvel at the real high detail guys, your Jim Lees, your Todd McFarlanes, your Michael Goldens, these guys who do superb, masterful details all over the place. But for my money, when you get a simplistic style like a Dan DeCarlo, you really have to, you have to appreciate the conscientiousness you need to have when you're creating an image, just something like this cover image right here, and again, this is from 94. He was well into his, like 20 years of being at Archie. So he'd established himself as the Archie artist at this period in time. And so I'm glad to have a nice representation of that. It's really kind of cool to see, like I said, to see an artist who, again, just dominated the subgenre that he was a part of. And again, you don't really see that very much, where like an entire subgenre or an entire line of comics is modeled after one guy. And, and that went on for for over a decade after he passed, is just an amazing thing to me. I mean, that's like a legacy you can't buy. No matter how great an artist you think you are, you can't buy a legacy like that. And and it's it even translates when you see the published version here. You see, and again, see, I like the colors. This is something I learned from artist Dan Laws. I mean, look in the background. You got like this light green color, so it's kind of a soft, cool tone, and yet you got the red and the yellows up here on the sweater. We're just pushing it forward. See, that's what you always say, is that when you have cool colors in the background, you want hot colors in the foreground to push it forward. Or if you got cool colors in the foreground, you want hot colors in the background to push it forward. Because that's how you project, in using color to make something stand out. The contrast of cool to hot. And, again, obviously that was something they understood here very well, as it presents very well here. And it just, again, just a very fun cover. Like I said, classic stuff. And, this one is special for me because I actually got it in another book, which I'll show you right here. There's a book here called The Art of Archie, the Covers. And I was contacted by editor Craig Yo to contribute. He saw my cover that I owned, and he said, hey, would you be willing to send us a nice quality scan of this so we can republish it in this hardcover of Archie's covers? And I said, certainly. And, if you have this book, or if you ever see this book, go to page 146 and you will see my cover is in there, and it even has a little dissertation under it saying that I am the owner of this image. So, just that was kind of cool. It's just a little facet of all this stuff that I really enjoy. How like being a fan, and yet you can be a part of it. Like letters pages were always that way for us. You can go out and have a letter in the letters page, and you become a part of the comic forever. Even in a small way. And this to me is like the same thing for like us comic art guys. When you get someone contacting you, say, hey, can I have that image so I can use it in a tribute book or a collecting book, a collector's book like this, and they ask you and then even give you the little notation of that you're the owner. It makes you feel like you're part of something more. You're not just a guy buying a product. You're part of history. You're part of an industry that you love. And so I really was very appreciative of Craig Yo for doing that, to reaching out the way he did. And it's just, like I said, just a fun thing. And again, from a fun line of comics, is there anything more wholesome and sweet than Archie comics? I don't think so. And again, the great Dan DeCarlo, like a dominating master in this field of his, like I said, coming from his risque and sort of salacious roots to doing the most wholesome comic line and dominating it for literally decades. That is just, again, a legacy I don't think anybody could ever hope to match. And it's one of the reasons I'm very glad to have this piece in my collection. Not just for the point of being a serious collector, you have to have something, but to have this piece, and to have all that history behind it is just it's a very, very special thing that I'm very thankful for. And again, it's one of the reasons I love this hobby so much. And so there we have it. Another one in the books there. It's a nice little fun image here of Archie Comics cover. Again, what did you guys think? Do you think I'm on the money with DeCarlo? Do you think he has a legacy few could hope to match? Or do you think he was just a guy who just fell into some luck and, it just happened the way it happened? Let me know what you think, because I always want to hear what you guys got to say. And before I head out here, I want to say, get ready. I've been teasing at this for a little while, but I've got a new little feature I'm going to be starting to do here called Should Have Been a Comic. And basically what that's about is, you've heard the old expression of, because you demanded it. Well, this is kind of in that vein, because I was, asking people when I came back here, a couple months ago after a nice hiatus from medical issues, what should I do? Is there anything you'd like to see? And someone suggested this, and I thought this idea was kind of cool. So I looked into it a bit, and I'm going to try and do it. We'll see how it works out. And what it basically is I'm taking an old cartoon series from the past, something I maybe probably grew up watching myself. And, it's one that never made it in the comic books, because you see a lot of comics, have been based off of cartoons and vice versa, where cartoons have been based, I've had comics made about them. And these are ones that no one ever did that. And it's kind of interesting, the ones that weren't chosen. So I got a few set up, and I'll be doing those over the next few weeks. You'll be seeing these come up, but I hope you guys will enjoy that. And like I said, the first one's coming up here pretty soon. I'll probably have in the next few days. It should be a lot of fun. So I hope you guys will check that out when it comes out. And, again, I appreciate you coming here today. Be sure to check out the links down below for all the cool stuff, all the places you can find me and see some more cool stuff. And I will be back soon with another video for you. And until next time, take care.